So that's kind of our history. So we're going to, have some fun now and maybe look at some of the myths. Back then, most of you are too young to remember these days, so I'll have to do a little bit of background for you. But looking at these first two right here, passionless and humorless. The old perfect iconography for what constituted the autism spectrum really was embedded in the portrayal of Mr. Spock from the first Star Trek. That to everybody was the embodiment of autism in a lot of ways. Didn't have any feelings, didn't understand these feelings. He was sort of walking around, clueless as to human behavior, especially when emotions started to come around, and things like humor, as well. And here we start to get into the area of, again, those medical ethical issues of it doesn't exist because I can't see it. And I would contend, I would give maybe those medical professionals a little bit of a break, because there really are two layers of duplicity that will come about within the autism spectrum that will fool those clinicians. And the first layer of duplicity has to do that different things may trigger passion or humor in an individual on the autism spectrum than, let's say, you might experience. And the second level of duplicity is that it might be displayed differently. We're sometimes famous for, laughing at things we're supposed to be crying about, or crying about, things we're supposed to be laughing about. And there is some truth to that a little bit. But, especially sometimes, when we learn that, with stims and people who might flap their arms, usually that was almost always thought to be a sign that, something was wrong. And there are tremendous amounts of people with autism that flap their arms and show their teeth when they're actually really happy and when they're having a great time. So if you're a doctor, okay, and your only idea of passion comes through the way Luciano Pavarotti sings an opera aria, or the way Alex Ovechkin goes after a loose puck, which really is the coolest thing on the planet, okay, if you've ever seen it, then you're going to miss a lot if that's your only idea of what passion looks like. And with humor, for instance, I still don't get jokes, and I know how to pretend that I got them. Most jokes in my mind are constructed out of just wordplay, chopping up a word and making it sound a little bit different. And I'm like, what? Any idiot can open up a dictionary and spend a year and come up with, 20,000 wordplay jokes. So I don't understand where the fascination for that comes from. I don't understand a lot of certain types of humor, even if I can fake it really well. It just goes whoosh, okay? But there is one aspect of humor which I think the autism spectrum and everybody else really does come together on, and that is satire. The whole notion of making fun of greater society when, maybe if you had a hard time with greater society growing up, that of course it's going to be attractive. When I was a kid, there was only one outlet for satire, though, because Americans did not make fun of themselves. And that was Monty Python's Flying Circus. And I was one of those annoying kids who knew every skit by heart, and I could do all the accents, and it just, it was hell for my mother. But today, Americans have gotten a little bit different, and we have tremendous amounts of shows that, utilize satire, which is stuff like South Park or The Simpsons, Family Guy, American Dad, stuff that Spectrum kids just, gravitate towards. And it's cool because it gives them an in, I think, to more, neurotypical social circles, because there is that shared bond about something in which everybody loves. So, Mr. Spock, well, thank you for your service. We've graduated from you. But you know what? One aspect of any marginalized community is going to be prickly, because we've had a bad time, okay? The autism community has never been prickly about the Mr. Spock stereotype. And that always fascinated me for a while, especially when I first started GRASP. It was like everybody was embracing this stereotype and not fighting it back. And then I kind of got it. I kind of got why everybody was fine with being associated with Mr. Spock. And that was because it wasn't about Spock, who Spock was. It was about the community in which Spock found himself. Spock's differences were treasured by those around him. He wasn't really, he had a fight with Bones every once in a while, but he was, for the most part, really, upheld for his behavioral differences and valued in the community in which he found himself. And that's the dream for so many people on the autism spectrum. So after that, it just made perfect sense. Oh, you're the pack. No sexual appetite. If any of you still believe in this particular myth. By the time I left, GRASP had about 28 national chapters, and there's one in Long Island, New York, which was predominantly 26-year-old males. And if you still believe in this myth, I would invite you to go to one of their meetings. And I would invite you to sit and listen to their conversation and what it sort of circles around. And you come out of that and tell me if you don't think there's any sexual appetite in the autism spectrum. We're all great at math. We're not. Bullies are eventually punished by life. I would actually like to commend all the anti-bullying work that's gone on over the past 5 years. It really is tremendous. I'm one of the few people that confesses I think we may be going too far towards in the other end. But overall, I would take it over what existed 5 years ago. That's for sure. But it's always sort of, one of the things that we haven't really looked at tremendously enough is, I think, what happened to those bullies from long ago. Because I think that there's always been this idea or this fantasy. Actually, that's more appropriate. We've had a fantasy that the people that bullied kids in middle school or whatever, that, what happened to their heart and the darkness, that fell over their heart because they had bullied people, led to these awful lives where they had they went from dead-end job to dead-end job and, relationship that brought broken up to broken relationship to broken relationship. And on some rainy night, and they're in their 40s and they're lying in the gutter and in one hand they're holding a bottle of whiskey. And, they're thinking to themselves, before their liver kicks out and they pass into the great beyond, the last thought they have on this earth is, boy, I wish I hadn't bullied autistic Johnny. It's a great fantasy. It's a really, really great fantasy. Unfortunately, the opposite is kind of true. The studies that they did back then were, to me, the more illuminating studies. And they showed that bullies actually got pretty good jobs later on. Bullies actually were thought of very, very highly in the communities in which they grew up, or they found themselves later on, and had families. And I think it's those bullies that perpetuated the phrase, bullying is just a part of growing up. That's a phrase that a lot of us heard, and it doesn't really make any sense. I was very lucky. Actually, I sort of told you I had a little bit of a street background. Well, the most notorious juvenile delinquents in Providence, Rhode Island, had my back when I was growing up, so I didn't experience this. And it's one of the reasons why I might have the confidence to be able to get up and speak to you here today, compared to other people that have been through this, and the very legitimate post-traumatic stress disorder that a lot of them experience from this, and still today experience. Let's say we're one of those individuals. And let's say somebody comes up to you and says, what's your problem? Bullying is just a part of growing up. Well, doesn't that make you feel twice as bad? And what a loser you are because you can't forget those images that keep revolving around in your head? That just doubles the hurt. So I always thought that was important. This is a community-wide thing, though. This is not, usually the act of an individual. The really successful bullying programs, in my mind, aren't just the ones that, let's say, punish the bystander as much as the bully. They punish the kids that, walked by when the bullying incident was happening who said nothing just as much as the bully. Those are great, but they're only a start. There were also, like in my day, there were tons of teachers, who were like, oh, that kid, he's disruptive in class. Hey, football team guys, I'll turn a blind eye, no sweat. It was teachers like that, the really, progressive programs. We get rid of those teachers now. So we're evolving. 65 to 85% girls. Okay? This was always thought, from the inception as a real boys issue in the autism spectrum. But again, we're talking about behaviors. And behaviors also, in addition to passing through cultural filters, they also have to pass through filters of what we call gender expectation. And that 65 to 85% number, while it's not very exact, there's a big 20% discrepancy there, okay? That is the number for how many diagnoses are happening, okay? So the girls are getting diagnosed 15 to 35% as much as boys are. However, what's the real number of who actually has the condition? Forget about who's getting diagnosed for it, okay? And I don't know if I can really stand here and look you in the face, although I can't see your faces too well, okay? That it's going to be 50-50 when all is said and done, but it's a lot closer to 50-50 than it is this. I'm going to fast forward past this last bullet point quick, and we're going to talk about girls really quick. Okay, eye contact, for instance. If you're a boy and you don't make eye contact with a new individual after you meet them and shake your hand for really stupid reasons, okay? The boy is thought of as, ooh, something's wrong with this kid. Whereas if a girl doesn't make eye contact with you when she shakes hands, she's shy. Again, stupid reasons. But because of those stupid reasons, that boy has a better chance of getting that diagnosis that could really, really help them out in life. Next bullet is going to say team sports, something like that, right? Yeah, interest in team sports. If a boy doesn't have an interest in team sports, people are going to notice. People are going to say, what's wrong with this kid? Okay? Yes, they're going to notice. Whereas if a girl doesn't have an interest in team sports, she's feminine. Again, it's a stupid stuff. But still, that boy will have a better chance of getting identified for the diagnosis that could really, really help them out in life. Now, another thing that we've discovered is that depression manifests itself a lot quicker in girls. And depression works very similarly to, let's say, substance abuse, because it can numb you. It can, mask a lot of the more agitated autistic behaviors that might give other people pause to think, holy cow, this person might have an autism spectrum condition. And that, too, fools a lot of people. But there's also something that happens, when people are adults. And I hated to use that word submissive because it's a really judgmental term, but couldn't think of anything else, so sorry about that. Let's look at the stereotypically submissive adult male. In your mind, you think about them, okay? Maybe it's the comic book guy from The Simpsons, okay? Or maybe it's, just Bachelor Uncle Fred again. But usually this individual doesn't have a mate. And so everybody around that individual wonders, what's wrong, And inevitably, that could turn into that individual getting the diagnosis that could really help them out in life. But if we also then look at the stereotypically submissive adult female, she almost always is in a relationship. And usually those are the ones that we, inevitably conclude are abusive relationships and really horrible things happen. Now, that woman might get pitied and sympathy for a lot of very real things, but is she going to ever get looked at for an autism diagnosis because of what she goes through? No, usually not. So now we come to the potentially redundant charts. Here's what I'm going to do. My leash. I feel like a chained dog. Got to get one of those lavalier, hookup kind of things. In this column, we're going to put, again, one of those bullet points that's a behavioral characteristic of the autism spectrum. And then in this middle column, we're going to look at that cold, stigmatizing way of looking at that particular behavioral characteristic. And then over here, we're going to put a really happy, hippy-dippy, crunchy granola, feel-good kind of different way of explaining that characteristic. What I would like you to understand as we go through this is that neither one of these two columns, the center column and the right column, are any more right or wrong than each other. But there is going to be a difference in terms of the effect that it can have on the kid that is being thought of in question to these circumstances. Easy one coming up. Intense absorption in a topic or field of interest. The individual is obsessed and is driven further into this absorption by anxiety and stress. The individual is passionate. Okay? What we're doing with these charts is a lot of glass half empty, glass half full kind of comparisons. Okay? And we have different words in the English language for a lot of stuff like this. One person's obsession is another person's passion. And yet they are very, very different meaning words. One has a positive connotation to it, and the other has a negative. And neither one is going to be any more right or wrong than the other. But you are going to be putting a very clear opinion about that individual when you choose to use either one of these two words. So which one are you going to choose? Professorial monotoned manner of speaking. Stilted awkwardness that is off-putting to others, often preventing further steps in a potential relationship. The individual is focused on being clear in what is being said by utilizing a strength, text. Yes, we are challenged at this thing called nonverbal communication, which has to do with gesture and tone and facial expressions. And somewhere a long time ago, they did a study of when the baby is really ready to learn, that a normal kid or a neurotypical kid is predominantly, if I can get the numbers right, is going to want to learn 55% through text, 37% through gesture, and 8% through tone. Whereas an individual diagnosed along the autism spectrum is going to want to learn 99% through text. Okay? Soliloquies, euphemisms, sarcasms. We have to be taught that stuff. It does not come to us naturally. Discomfort or inability at small talk. Sees no logic in it. Off-putting and impolite. The individual gets to the point. And for many people, this is very, very refreshing. Inflexibility, need for routine, disliking of change. An inconvenience for those in contact with the individual can also lead to anxiety and or trauma in the individual when change is mandatory. The individual is focused more on the routine task than the next person. Also, the sense of order caused by routine can be very calming and can reduce the anxiety caused by living in a world that confuses you. Okay? Look, every individual on the autism spectrum is going to have those social banana peels, and they're going to have more than you. Okay? The problem, however, is that the anxiety is produced because you know that there's a banana peel waiting for you somewhere in your future. But you don't know when it's going to hit you, and you don't know how big the fall is going to be this time. So routines are definitely safety valves. We feel good. We feel as though no surprises. We can count on this. Problems with imagination may have played out most noticeably when the individual was a child as a difficulty with imaginative play. Varying degrees of inability towards imagination and creative or flexible thinking may be indications of a great technical mind. Now, I'm going to play a trick on you. I want you to remember this slide as we go to the next slide, okay? So remember everything about this. Problems with non-artistic activities or fields of study can be seen as goofing off or not focused enough on serious matters. May be indications of a creative mind. Anybody see what I just did? What did I do? A what? It's the exact opposite. She's absolutely right. I just flipped them. Technical mind, creative mind. Here's the negative way of looking at it. Here's the positive way of looking at it. Double negative, double positive, okay? This isn't, and you didn't probably, those of you who didn't catch this probably didn't because I'm just using psychological gobbledygook in my mouth, okay, as I'm describing all this stuff. But it's an easy peg. This is all just about your attitudes, our attitudes. What attitude do we present when we are confronted with a behavioral difference? Are we going to be negative about it, or are we going to be positive about it? Again, neither one is right or wrong, but I will say this. If the individual that you're talking about is in the same room when you're talking about this stuff, there is going to be an effect. Okay? That individual is going to think that you think positively about their behavioral differences, or that individual is going to think that you think negatively about their behavioral differences. And that is very clear. And that, once you understand that you have a choice, it's not just what you're automatically going to be thinking or saying anymore. You're going to know now that you have a choice in terms of the words that you say in response to those behavioral differences. It says, whatever comes into their head, unaware of the potential damage the statement might cause. The individual is rude. The individual is honest. Penchant for interrupting others. The individual is rude. The individual has something to say, another indicator that social contact is indeed desired, and that desire needs to be encouraged. I'll show you tell you about a very silly catch-22 that I find in our environment or in this particular word. And it has to do with the word antisocial. Because every time that I've worked as a consultant in which I've been told or heard about somebody that was antisocial in a given moment, almost every single time that moment occurred when that individual was trying to be anything but. They just fell on their face. or they said something that was quote unquote inappropriate. Inappropriate, by the way, is my least favorite word in the entire English language. And if you're wondering what my favorite word, it's good. But seriously, I mean, there's that kid who, the 3-year-old girl who's reading in a corner that everybody's going to think, is the most well-behaved child. And that could be the antisocial one that hates everybody around her. So how we use those words is sometimes very, very strange indeed. So moving on now to some of the side subjects, okay? Socialization, which of course is on every parent's mind and is one of the bugaboos that we get. Now, I'm not saying that we should, do like my Chinese friends and, change our culture. We live in this culture. We get that. We really, really do. And if our individuals are going to succeed herein, they do indeed need to learn about how their culture that they find themselves in works, okay? A lot of some of the younger kids used to say, well, I was born on the wrong planet. I think that's kind of cute and kind of nice, but I actually think that this experience is very much akin to the experience of any immigrant, where you in essence do find yourself in a place where, the workings of people and how the world operates outside your home is very strange. And yet, at the same point, while you have to, if you want to make a living and support your family, while you have to understand and try and figure out how that world works outside, that if you don't try to retain a sense of self and be naturally who you really are behind closed doors, you're going to psychologically suffer as well. So you have this material suffering versus psychological suffering if you choose, to go hog wild into assimilation or hog wild into screw you if you can't take me for who I am, okay? There's got to be a little bit of that marriage there. A lot of people will tell you, oh, the perfect job for people on the spectrum is, data input. Or no, it's, financial analysis. No, the perfect job for somebody on the autism spectrum is anthropologist. Because we're all trying to figure out how this weird world works, okay? To a higher degree probably than other people. Because, there's nothing, you understand too, there's nothing about the autism spectrum that people who aren't on the autism spectrum don't experience. But the difference in degrees is noticeable. So moving on to really just socialization right now, right off the bat, okay? And I think one of the first questions you have to ask if you want to study the socialization of a kid or what have you is, does that kid really want to? Yes, there are going to be two components to look at with when you ask this particular question of the kids. And the first of which has to do with their diagnosis. Yes, they might not be interested that much in socialization. Yes, the actual act of socializing, the sensory stuff where I have to keep my eyes focused on your eyes in reciprocal conversation, which might be really, really difficult because I have trouble with eye contact. I'd prefer to look at you like this maybe. All that stuff, my head hurts, the lights in the floor, all these things that contribute to sensory overload can happen within socialization. It's going to be tiring for more people on the autism spectrum than it is who are not on the autism spectrum. However, you still will see that anybody before they have a consistent sexual relationship or a great job where they have colleagues that they hang out with, that everybody's going to want to have friends. It's not like everybody is Mr. Spock and can handle no socialization. I would argue that unless somebody is so significantly challenged that they can't even recognize that they're dying physically inside, okay, that if you drop any of us into the high Arctic North, okay, all alone in the cold, the first thing we're going to do, no matter how quote-unquote antisocial we might be, the first thing anybody's going to do is look for another human being because we know that we need each other for survival. We get that part. It's not that bad, I promise you. But the second aspect of socialization that you have to look at too is how many times did that individual try to make a friend or get a girlfriend? To the point where they fell on their face over and over and over again. And just like the rest of you, inevitably you just say, you know what, screw this, I quit. I've had it, I'm done. And then it's, hello, World of Warcraft. I'm 24/7, get the Hot Pockets ready. I'm there. That's my life now. Okay? So I don't know to what degree you're going to have that, lack of a desire to socialize be a part of their natural diagnosis or some natural life experiences that they've had, but it's a good question to ask as you move forward. We will also have different learning styles. A lot of us, you really can, I think, divide people on the autism spectrum into whether or not they're visual learners or non-visual learners. And a visual learner, personified might be somebody like Temple Grandin, who, thought of the designs of all those cattle facilities in her mind, and that was how she kind of, then threw them onto paper conceptually. Whereas the math brain, which is the exact opposite, and that's the non-visual learner. And usually this will also play a decent role in how an individual is going to want to socialize. You also have where's their education style. Now I know we're in the Midwest, which is inclusion crazy, okay, compared to the more traditional special education environment where I came from in the Northeast. But you still have, it's enough of an aspect to study whether or not that kid is in an all autism program or a special education program, an inclusion program, a mainstream program, because this too will have an impact on how that kid wants to socialize. Common connections, oddly enough, are to me the strongest first initiative in teaching a kid how to socialize well with others. As I sort of alluded to in the beginning, when we're into something, we're really into it. And we're really not into something, we're really not into it. I was one of those kids who whenever was focused, was told, you got to study this subject, biology, hated biology. And, people thought that, I was willful and stubborn and, had all these things on my report cards. I remember very distinctly trying to do biology work, but I also remember very distinctly that it felt like somebody had put a crowbar between my head and my ear and was yanking it, in many different directions. It physically hurts to try and focus on something that you're not interested. It really, really does. But if it is something that we're interested in, and you're just focusing on it and you wake up and you realize, oh wow, everybody's been yelling at me, telling me to stop doing what I was doing. Wow, oh wow, I have to pee too, holy cow. Lots of things can happen. And that's really, really cool. So if you take those special interests, those things that the kids are really passionate about, and you just find other kids that are passionate about the same things, whether it's video games, okay, unfortunately, but, sometimes it's other things like chess. Sometimes it's, individualized sports. But I will also tell you, just so that I don't send you away thinking here that this is a foolproof method, I'll give you an example of a story where this doesn't work. I knew two guys in New York that have had a chess game going on for almost 20 years. They play it regularly. They play it once a week. One is an NYU professor who is brilliant, and he has a fairly large family, or a fairly large extended family. He's a grandfather now, and he makes a decent amount of money. He's got like one of those Manhattan townhouses. It's got like 3 or 4 floors. And it's interesting because on all the Jewish holidays, he pays for all his kids and grandkids to fly to their house. His wife does all the cooking. And he stays in his top floor study in his library and doesn't see his kids or grandkids very much. He really just hibernates there while everybody has a great time. It's actually beautiful because he's got so much social anxiety. The guy can barely teach, but what he teaches is just so brilliant. And his kids and his grandkids, they understand, and they don't punish him for it, or they don't feel less of him, or they don't feel cheated, or they don't feel betrayed, or they don't feel unloved. They've had it indoctrinated in them why grandpa is different in a successful manner. And yes, people come up and have like one-on-one visits up with him up in the library every once in a while, and that's fine, but it's a very unique situation. But anyway, this guy loves chess, and he has a chess game with another guy on the spectrum who's about the same age, and yet from a very, very different walk of life. He has no family, no kids. He repairs guitars, actually, in the back end of a guitar store. And he lives, in a hovel somewhere in Queens, as opposed to having a Manhattan townhouse. But they get together almost every week, to play chess. Here's the problem. They still don't know the first thing about one another. They get together and they play chess. One doesn't know what the other one does for a living. One doesn't know whether the other one has a family. They focus on the chess. So I leave you with that. Welcome to my country, Mr. Bond. Sports. I carry a lot of personal baggage regarding this because I was one of those kids who was initially told, God, you don't even know how to run, do you? Because my motor skills were just so freaky looking to everybody else. And then I started to process a bad day by throwing a ball off a wall, which I sometimes did for 4 hours a day. And inevitably, I had a pitching arm that got me sent to the best baseball camp in the world at the time, 4 summers in a row. And I had, guys scribbling their notes in the back of home plate, as they watched me pitch, during this baseball camp and stuff like that. And when I, obviously came into this field and stuff like that, I suddenly quickly realized, wow, everybody else who was on the autism spectrum got shut out of sports completely. Holy cow. Why was that? Well, I probably shouldn't put that one up. I wasn't done yet. But anyway, I think they were shut out because their caretakers were terrified of dealing with the lessons and the reactions to how we learn to be graceful losers and graceful winners, and the tantrums that would come about if we had those lessons applied. I think those lessons are actually essential to anybody, especially to people on the autism spectrum, because it's going to do so many things to an individual's confidence level, as well as to an individual's, let's say, image of their own physical bodies, that is really, really negative over the long term. And this is a population of people that is psychologically challenged enough as it is. Let's not make things worse. Because there's the obvious physical benefit and the motor skills issues, okay? The physical benefit, obviously it's just good health. Quite frankly, if you were bullied by, let's say, those guys on the football team, okay? You're not just gonna hate those guys, you're gonna hate football. You're not just gonna hate football, you're gonna hate sports. You're not just gonna hate sports, you're gonna hate physical health. You're gonna poo-poo it. You're gonna think that you're on a political soapbox as you say negative things about people that try to stay physically healthy. It's not good. These sports arenas, okay, whether it's rinks, whether it's courts, whether it's fields, these are the arenas where certain emotions are appropriate and where it is safe to apply them. Now, it's interesting coming from here because I have both my spectrum kid and my non-spectrum kid, who still shows shades, but they're jocks. I mean, I tried to get them into the arts. I tried to tell them I was a guitar player too. I had long hair down to here. Oh, at that baseball camp when you have long hair back in the 70s, holy cow, okay? Because most of those kids were from south of the Mason-Dixon line, and there used to be all-star games over the weekends, and that was when the Scouts really came out, but it was when Crazy Parents came out too. And I'll never forget it, big Southern accent from the stands. Boy, if you don't get a hit off that hippie, you ain't coming home, I was not a strikeout pitcher. I was a ground ball sinker pitcher, and I knew if I threw any kind of a fastball into that kid, he was just going to pound it into the stratosphere. That ball would still be up in the air. But off-speed pitches, it pretzeled him up and he struck out. It was just hysterically funny. So anyway, okay. When my older son also started to be a pitcher, and he's now a pitcher at Grinnell University, by the way, when he started doing this as well, and I'm starting to realize, he's standing on that hill of dirt, and he has to throw a strike when everybody's screaming at him. Of course he's going to, have more confidence than your average spectrum kid because of experiences like that. And he's going to be able to process winning and losing, in a nice way. Notions of competition. Competition is something that we all have to do. We compete with each other for boyfriends and girlfriends. We compete with each other for jobs. In New York City, we compete with each other for apartments and for preschool placements. God, this stupid cord. Okay, so it's a fact of life. And I will never forget those adults in that first Manhattan support group that we turned into GRASP and how they wouldn't even say words like, I can do better. Because if you say, I can do better, then you are competing against yourself. And their feelings towards competition and their anger at that particular idea actually would stop them from doing that because they felt so uncomfortable with competition, okay? And it's one of the areas also where I feel, as a school consultant, that I really have to contain my, are you kidding me, reactions. Because when we look at things like self-advocacy, which is one of our new catchphrases, I want my guys and girls not to just be able to say, I'm sorry, or I need help, which is pretty much all they're being taught right now. I also want them, even if because it might be socially inappropriate or whatever, just in their pocket to feel comfortable with being able to advocate for themselves under the context of your only duty on God's green earth is to get out of my way right now. I want them to feel that. And I want them to know that they have that at their disposal just as much as you have that feeling at your disposal when you need it. Oh, thank you, Stacy. Haley Wickenheiser and the school in Houston. There's also something that is starting to happen from science right now. And that is that as we look into, forget about your power walking and, your Zumba or whatever, that the really intensive stuff, okay, like the insanity workouts, which I've done, by the way, twice. They will kick your behind, man. Wow. But that intensive physical exercise might actually be a mega solution for a lot of autistic issues, such as executive functioning, such as emotional regulation, and such as cognitive functioning. I did a piece at one point in my Huffington Post column. There's a very interesting phenomenon happening in sports called the Players Tribune. And it's where athletes tell their own stories. Derek Jeter, the New York Yankee shortstop after retiring, this was his dream project, and he started it about a year and a half ago. And so what's happening now is, you're sidestepping the sports journalist in order to be able to get your story across to the fans. You're just going directly to them. And I wrote a piece just, sort of speculating that when the first major sports individual who's on the autism spectrum comes out, that it would probably just be through the Players Tribune as opposed to through, let's say, the Boston Globe or the Green Bay Post-Gazette. And I got contacted by some really interesting people afterwards. One of which was a school in Houston that, I've since talked to and hope to work with soon, where they're doing a lot of this stuff. They are actually, let me get to Haley first. Haley Wickenheiser, anybody know that name? Anybody know who she is? Well, it's good that we've forgotten it because she's actually somebody that we kind of do need to forget. She's the captain of the Canadian Olympic hockey team. And I don't know if you remember the choke job that our girls did in the last Olympics, like in the last 5 minutes where we lost the gold medal game. It was really ugly. It's brutal. It's something that I still can't even talk about without a therapist nearby. And anyway, Haley got in touch with me after the article. She saw the article and she was like, I got news for you. I've done my graduate school work working with adults with autism in intensive physical exercise situations. Now, of course, my first thought is one of the best female hockey stars in the world has to go to graduate school? Are you kidding me? So anyway, but found out this school in Houston was implementing a lot of those theories. They hook their kids up and they absolutely make them go through intensive workouts to start their school day. And if they have a test coming up, they do another intensive workout right before that test comes up. And their tests, based on other kids of their same cognitive ability, are vastly superior. They're doing amazing stuff. So this is kind of something that's not only been an unfair absence in the lives of kids on the spectrum, but it also might be kind of like the next big thing scientifically. Confidence, we've sort of talked about that, but confidence is, I know it's easy for a New Yorker to say this because we exude more confidence than we deserve to, right? Okay? We do. We think we know more than other people, and it's absolutely true. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But we do think that, okay? Always. And, don't let anybody, tell you differently. But confidence really is, I inevitably actually ended up doing a lot of travel baseball coaching, and I was a pitching coach for a college team. It wasn't Arizona State, believe me, but did a lot of coaching, and the whole phrase of fake it until you make it really applies to the whole notion of confidence because it really is just a mental trick that you can switch on. And any study will tell you that confidence means so much more than the resources at your disposal, the junk in your pants, what school you went to. It means more than any of these things that we relate to personal success, okay? Confidence means more than any of them. Confidence gives you the ability to just kick down the door and see what happens afterwards. It's very interesting, actually, before I get to the arts thing, Another thing that, my little different working mind sort of noticed as I was growing up was that there was a big difference between ego and pride. And that people poo-pooed ego and they thought that pride was good. And I felt the exact opposite. I thought that pride kept people down. Oh, I'm too good for that. Oh, my standards wouldn't allow that. So I'm not going to chase that opportunity. And my thinking was, screw that. Are you kidding me? Go for it. What's the matter with you? What is your problem? Ego made you feel great about yourself. If it ruffled other people's feathers, then that was the fault of those other people. Because that ego was nothing but confidence that was allowing you to really pursue whatever you wanted to pursue, your dreams and all that junk. No slight to the arts. Unfortunately, we also still live in a culture where if you love sports, you're not into the arts, and if you love the arts, you're not into sports, and this is stupid, stupid, stupid. The two could work perfectly in tandem with one another, but they don't. But I'm not going to put up a slide about the arts here because I think we do get that. I think we have implemented those programs into schools, even if funding is cutting them right now, okay, where we understand that through creative expression, we will be able to get things out of our system that otherwise through regular dialogue we are not able to get out, and that this is imperative to any human being. Families. Again, we're idiots. Master's degrees in neuroscience did not accompany us after we were born. We will have to go through the theories of, oh, did I eat too much tuna when I was pregnant? Oh, did I get this, did my child get this because he was too close to used iPod batteries? And yes, those are actual theories that have been thought about in the last 15 years, okay? And so you're probably going to also have to go through the whole vaccine controversy. Did my kid get this from vaccines? Even though, with no disrespect intended to ex-Playboy bunnies, and I mean that, okay? But when the head of your foundation or your theory, is not somebody whose background is based in science, but who is an ex-Playboy bunny, okay? Something's wrong with your movement. Jenny McCarthy is the person I'm thinking of. Stigma of the aforementioned history, okay? If you've got family members who might have been around during the Bruno Bettelheim days, okay? My mother is the perfect example. She sees all of, the changes that I've been able to implement, in terms of just how I feel about myself. Now, granted, I was one of the lucky ones as we've gone over, but she sees all the good about this stuff, but she will admit to you, I still have a hang up about it. I grew up during those Bettelheim days, It was, if you had stuff like this back then, you were broken. And you were told, put your kid in a home and forget you ever had him. So you may be dealing with families where these ideas still dominate somewhere. And that's if you work with families, but just in case you do. Families also don't get a break from one another, okay? These are simply referred to as accumulated frustrations, okay? When there's a big fight in the family household, it lingers even after, let's say things got somewhat resolved. Whereas if people go outside, they get a clean slate. It's one of the things I love about travel. If we'd had more time today, I would have talked a lot about travel. Travel is something that I just regard as the best recipe for individuals on the autism spectrum. And that's if you're a significantly challenged individual who is learning how to walk across the street and buy a candy bar from the newspaper guy by yourself for the first time, or whether it's doing something like what I did, which was living out of my car, working odd jobs to pay for food and gas for 5 months in this country, thinking that I was an 8th rate Jack Kerouac, okay? The whole notion that, when you travel is that you have a clean slate. Nobody knows who you are. Nobody knows about all those bad experiences that happened at the school, okay? It's like the total fresh start. And usually if you're that, person on the spectrum, you have had some bad experiences, okay? Whether it's, because other people were intentionally mean to you or just, wanted to do the right thing but screwed up, whatever the case may be. You're going to have more of those than the next person. And when I was 23 years old, and in graduate school and taking 5 months off to, do this Jack Kerouac thing, and I would go into a town and you always do the small towns, never do the big cities because nobody notices the stranger in a big city. But they do notice you. You put 2 quarters down on a pool table in a bar, you're going to have an adventure in a small town, guaranteed. Guaranteed. And, if I would, concentrate on doing things like slowing down my voice a little bit, maybe wearing an L.L. Bean chamois shirt instead of the white T-shirt, stuff like that. Social experiments, okay? And if it totally went bust and I fell on my face in this social experiment, who cares? Big whoop. You're never going to see these people again. Who cares? You just move on to the next town and you try again based on the lessons that you had learned. It's the greatest thing in the world. The genetic nature, okay? If, let's say, you're a school professional. I mean, I'm constantly telling school professionals, as I say, well, I had so much trouble with the parent because the parent was just going off and on. And I was just like, yeah. Well, obviously there's ways, depending on what type of a job that you have and what type of position you have and what the legal parameters are around that, that you can somehow get it through to the the parent, that maybe they need to take a look under the hood themselves. And that's if they can handle that knowledge. Sex. There, I said it. All right. Also, this is an interesting one because this is an area actually where the autism world sometimes I don't think needs to listen to the neurotypical world for lessons, because the neurotypical world is just as screwed up about this subject as the autism spectrum world is, okay? Especially here in this particular country, all right? To start with, the whole friendships first thing, okay? I'm sorry, but we have this thing called physical attraction, okay? Oh my gosh, that person is hot. And if you think that that's, something that people on the autism spectrum don't experience, again, take that into consideration, that there are going to be raw physical feelings and desires, as opposed to, 5 hours in incense and candles, which is what most of the sexuality curriculums seem to be suggesting, is the only way to make sexuality work in the autism spectrum. Bodies versus minds, okay? One of the things that people do forget sometimes is that while our minds, when you're on the autism spectrum, do indeed grow differently, our bodies usually don't. There may be sensory issues going on that will affect the physical body. There may be traumas that never got reported because you were in a vulnerable position early on in your life. But usually the body grows at the same rate that everybody else's body grows at. So why skimp on the sexuality education? Not that the neurotypical kids are getting good sexuality education either, but why skimp on it for the autism spectrum or anybody with developmental disabilities? Watch the curriculums. They're awful. They're all awful, whether you're neurotypical or on the spectrum. The curriculums that we use, it's still way too much about, that if you want it 5 times a day for the rest of your life, then you poo-poo people who want it 5 times in their lifetimes, and vice versa. We love to judge. We absolutely love to judge when it comes to this particular subject about people who might have different desires than we do. And we're really screwed up as a result of it. There's a brilliant sexuality educator in Pennsylvania who said the best thing, and that was that we teach our kids that we never, ever, ever want them to have great sex. Sexual pluralism, okay? And by that, I mean a whole host of things having to do with orientation, having to do with appetite. I could go on and on about this. Actually, I just finished the 3rd book, which is Why Am I Afraid of Sex? Building Sexual Confidence in the Autism Spectrum and Beyond. And it's really funny. I've just hit this slide and I've just gone, wait, why am I not reciting it the same way I usually do? And it's because my head is filled with 10 gazillion new ideas and I haven't really formulated them yet. But we're not pluralistic when it comes to this. We don't respect other people's rights to be different herein. And that's got to change. Porn. You're going to have a lot of people on the autism spectrum veering towards porn, and that's normal. But in essence, while you have all of the fake moans and exaggerated body parts and all that sort of jazz, the one great thing about it to me is that it can keep an individual's desire for a sex life active during, let's say that individual needs more developmental time before they're ready for such a relationship. If that's going to keep them from, just giving up on a sex life someday, then I'm all for it. And, a lot of times too, it can be a visual demonstrator. I have seen couples, for instance, who have developmental disabilities in certain workshops. They will be able to point to a screen and go, oh, thank God. That's what I want you to do to me. And it's very helpful for those particular couples sometimes. One of the issues, though, has always been with the significantly challenged individual. I can tell you that there's been many a professional that I've heard recite the story of how that guy just quote unquote whipped it out and blah, 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 blah. And everybody's got a story like that. And my thinking is, what if I'm that individual? And what if I've just discovered this and I realize this is the greatest thing I will ever know on this planet? And if you tell me that I can't do this under certain circumstances, then that relationship actually might be broken for a long time. So, one of the things that usually happens is that significantly challenged individuals do not get forewarning as to what the changes are going to be like to their bodies during puberty. And it's the stupidest thing in the world to me, because if you think you've seen behavior problems out of that individual and puberty happens and they haven't been forewarned of what's going to happen to their bodies, you ain't seen nothing yet. You ain't seen behavioral problems yet. So far to go. We have far to go. Disclosure. Disclosure is what I was talking about, what I hope to do with all of our kids. And that has to do with the art or the science of being able to tell someone, I have autism, when they leave school. Okay? And it's one that when I work with the kids themselves, okay, that we usually spend a little bit more time on than with other subjects, because it's actually a lot more complicated than you might think. Disclosure can be broken down into a lot of different areas, such as who, okay? Who is it appropriate to tell, and who is it not appropriate to tell that you have autism to? Should you tell your sibling if you get diagnosed late in life? Should you tell somebody you're on a date with that you get, that you have autism? Should you tell everybody on the street and run out and make sure that everybody on the street knows that you have autism? And of course, there are yes and no answers. And we have a lot of fun, actually, with the younger kids when we go through a list of people as to who to tell and maybe not to tell, and they get to, see if they know whether or not they should tell those people or not tell those people. It's actually a lot of fun. But at the same point, what is interesting is that you want to talk about an arbitrary science. You're telling a kid whose ability to judge another person socially and what their intent might be and whether or not they're even, getting good vibes or bad vibes from that individual. You're asking an autistic kid basically to be able to make the decision as to whether or not they should disclose or not disclose to that individual. So whenever anybody is ever teaching the subject of disclosure to kids on the spectrum, they really have to put in something about the fact you're going to get this wrong a lot. And let's just be prepared for that. That's got to be a part of it. So you also have the how, okay? How to disclose. Are you going to disclose in an email? Are you going to disclose by just walking up to somebody and just telling them, I have autism and, here's how we're going to talk about this? I can tell you there's a gazillion creative ways of how to tell somebody, that you have autism. When I was in New York, there was a very young woman from Georgia who had gotten diagnosed late in life, and she had great anxiety about how to tell her very conservative family in Georgia about this new diagnosis. And she asked for my help, really just to kind of hold her hand through the process. When her family was going to be coming up for a visit, she created a PowerPoint presentation, which had music and which had a lot of old pictures of her as a child in these sort of stereotypically autistic poses. And I mean, everybody in that room, when she played it, was bawling. It was beautiful. And it was absolutely the right thing that family needed to hear. Clearly they were the types of folks that just couldn't handle being directly told that their child had gotten this diagnosis, or there was uncles and aunts there too. It was one of the most amazing points in my career, as head of GRASP, was seeing that. I can also tell you and share with you an example of how not to disclose. And that is, there is a wonderful woman named Ruth. And what is Ruth's last name? Shoot. Anyway, Ruth has always allowed me, and she allowed me in my first book, to share with audiences how she was just emotionally really kind of pent up, and when she got diagnosed late in life, it was just really kind of overwhelming for her. And she got on the computer and she sent an email to everybody in her address book that just said, I just got diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, and if you don't like it, the heck with you. I might have even been a little polite with one of the words just now. And, This is obviously the wrong way to do it, but credit to Ruth because she allows me to tell that story. When to disclose and when not to disclose. Actually, though, this one is really easy. This is just simply, again, you're selling yourself. You're selling the diagnosis too, really, when you disclose to people, but you're selling yourself. One of the things I'm always trying to tell people about confidence too, and happiness and emotional strength, I tell my kids is, I promise you, nobody wants to give a job to a sad sack, and nobody wants to date a sad sack. So, fake it until you make it. The when is you disclose when you're feeling good about who you are, not when you're feeling bad about who you are. That's an easy one. And then the why. It's always good for people to understand why they're disclosing because there's always a reason, okay? You don't decide to do something like that just out of nowhere. Now, you may want accommodations under IDEA. You may want accommodations under ADA. Usually it's the school, though, that provides IDEA, sorry. You may want accommodations under the Americans with Disabilities Act or Section 503. And you also might just want validation. You might want somebody to understand that in order for them to be in the place that they're in right now, that they had to work a little bit harder at it than you did. So, there's usually always a reason. It's good for the individual who's disclosing to understand what that reason is first.